today's video does contain subject matter that some viewers may find disturbing, and as such, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you'd like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the big old button to do so. And of course, thank you. When I was a teenager, I think around 16 or so, my parents and myself were invited to a family reunion with my mom's side of the family. My mom was from a few states away from where I grew up, and I had never met most of her side of the family, so I thought it would be really cool to go and get to know the people that she grew up with, and meet the people that I was related to and didn't know. My father was, unfortunately, not able to get out of a work trip that they wanted him to go on, so it was just me and my mom that were going to be going to the reunion. I was still pretty excited though, and when it came time to go, I was anxious for the whole thing, but in a good way. We got to my mom's hometown and we were staying with her parents, my grandparents, for the whole weekend. I had met my grandparents and they were decent people, so that was a fine time overall. And the first day of the reunion was a blast. Everyone was kind, we all introduced ourselves to the family, and I got to know some really great people. Then, around midday, I was talking to my mother and my grandmother, and they both looked past me with a look of complete and total disgust. I obviously turned to see what they were so upset about, and all I saw was some older guy walking into the room with a big smile on his face. He quickly made his way over to the three of us, and he put his arms out to hug my mom, who quickly just patted him on the back and pulled away. He then went to hug my grandmother too, but she turned to walk away from the situation pretty much immediately. After getting the cold shoulder from my grandma, he seemed to get the hint, and he turned to walk away from us and go mingle with the rest of everyone else. As soon as he walked away, I asked my mom what that was all about, and she told me that that man was actually her half-brother. At one point, my grandfather had had an affair with another woman, and they had a child from that affair. It was a rocky point in everyone's life, and it damn near split my grandparents up. But after a lot of rebuilding, they ended up getting back on track, and this man was that child. He was my mother's half-brother. I guess that this would technically make him my uncle. From what she said, he had done some really bad things, and he wasn't invited to the reunion because of his past. And they did not know why he was there. I left it at that because my mom didn't really seem to want to talk about what he had done. And, well, I respected that. But I told her to just do her best to ignore him and enjoy the time with family. She agreed and said that she would. The second day was a bit more of the same, though I had told my mom that I wanted to go out and get to know some of the other members of the family. She had introduced me to a lot of them on day one, but I wanted to socialize with them more and get to know them. She agreed, and she said that she was wanting to spend some time with my grandmother and her great aunt anyways. We agreed that we would meet back up at lunch, and we went off to do our own thing. About an hour into the whole thing, that man from the day before, my sketchy uncle, came up and asked me who I was. I was a bit reluctant to even talk to him, but I'm also not the type to do well in awkward situations. So I just quietly and reluctantly responded. I told him that my name was Cassie, and he then asked me who I was in the family. I stupidly told him that I was my mother's daughter, and his blank look changed to one that was beyond happy. He pushed his arms forward and pulled me into a hug, saying that he always wanted to meet me, and that I was such a lovely young lady. This hug was really weird to me because I wasn't really hugging him back, but he held me way too tight and way too long for it to be comfortable. As soon as he let go, he said that he was my uncle, Nicky, and he then asked me what I had heard about him from my mom. I told him that I hadn't heard much about him at all, and he almost seemed relieved. He then told me that he wanted to get to know me better, and that we should get together at some point so that he could be a part of my life. I just kind of smiled and laughed while nodding. He started telling me all about himself, saying that he didn't have much going on at the time, that he had made mistakes and that he doesn't have any kids, and that he had regretted that fact. He then made a comment about how he was single, like really emphasizing it, almost to a creepy degree. He then asked me if I had a boyfriend. I said that I did back home. And then he started asking me if I was a virgin, and that was where I decided the conversation was over. I told him that I needed to go because I wasn't comfortable talking about it, and he started laughing, saying that that meant that I wasn't. He then started asking me how many guys I had been with, what my favorite thing to do in bed was, and things like that. I pushed myself away from him, saying that I did not want to talk to him anymore. As I started walking away, he reached down and grabbed my wrist tightly, saying that I didn't have a choice in talking to him, and that he and I were going to get to know each other better. I pulled as hard as I could to get away from him, but he had an incredibly tight grip on me, and he was just sitting there laughing at the fact that I could not get away. At this point, I started screaming to let me go, just trying to get the attention of anybody else there. Then, as people started seeing what was going on, they all started approaching, and he pulled me closer, and he seriously whispered in my ear, "If I catch you alone, you'll regret it." And then he shoved me away and started walking away from me and leaving the park. No one else could really see what was happening where we were beyond me screaming to let me go, so they didn't really do much to stop him from walking away. My mom came over when she realized that it was me screaming, and I told her what happened, and she told somebody to call the cops to try to stop him from getting away. They did call the cops, but by the time they got there, he was already gone, and they pretty much said that if he came back, we should call them immediately. Obviously, I was freaked out because that was very creepy, and it was pretty clear that this guy was a predator. It was then that my mom started explaining more about my uncle and why they were surprised he was there. Apparently, my uncle Nicky had spent a number of years in prison, and they thought that he was still locked up. The reason he spent those years in prison was because he had actually assaulted my grandmother. He had broken into the house when she was home, and my grandfather was at work and my mother was at school. This was back when she was still a teenager. He then assaulted my grandmother physically, and when he was caught, he claimed he did it because my grandmother had taken his father away from him. If I had known this at the time, I would not have engaged in conversation with him. I would have made sure to avoid him at all costs. Unfortunately, with how he acted towards me, it was pretty clear that his behavior was not changed by prison, that he was still the monster that he was back then. Thankfully, this was the only time that I ever saw him, and he didn't come back to the reunion. My guess was because he knew he would probably get arrested. And this was obviously also pretty traumatic for my grandmother as well, and she didn't really want to be involved in the reunion anymore. This was pretty terrifying for all of us, to be honest. I'm glad it just ended with him being a creep towards me, and that he didn't cause any harm to anyone else while he was there. I have an interesting little story that happened to myself and my family during our Thanksgiving get-together in 2021. For some foundation to this story, my family has always been very close. We've typically always spent holidays together, and my grandmother has always been the pillar upon which our family connections were built. When my grandfather passed away unexpectedly in 2005, we all came together as a family to make sure that she had everything she needed, and it really brought us all closer together. From that moment on, the entire family made it a point to put the time aside to have a great get-together for pretty much every holiday. Easter, 4th of July, Christmas, and, of course, Thanksgiving. Even before my grandfather passed away, Thanksgiving was a day for my grandmother. She was the one that was all about preparing the meal, getting the tables set up for everyone, making sure everyone was well fed. It was her day to take care of the family, at her personal request for the most part. None of us ever expected her to do anything, and we always tried to intervene to get her to take it easy, but she was the type to shush us and tell her to let her, in her words, do the work to prove she was still useful. None of us ever wanted to push her or question her. We just let her do what she wanted to do, and offered to help where we could. All of this is to say that my grandmother was very well loved, very well cherished, and that Thanksgiving was an important holiday for her and the family. In around June of 2021, my grandmother got really sick. I don't remember the exact diagnosis, but it was a form of cancer that she'd once had that had gone into remission. But it was attacking her again, and it seemed like it was hitting her a lot harder. Honestly, everyone was expecting the worst because of her age and how quickly she went from doing okay to being able to barely get out of bed. She knew what was going on, and she and I talked a lot about things while she was in bed. There was one conversation that we had about the rest of the year, and I had mentioned that Thanksgiving was going to be a sad day if she wasn't there. I want to add here that she was very accepting of the situation, and she was very open about her mortality, so while some people may see this as a strange comment, it was one that was very normal in this context. She looked at me with a very stern face and said, "No, Valerie, I will be at Thanksgiving." She said it with intense conviction that told me she was being dead serious. I smiled and agreed with her, just saying that I'd see her there and how much I was looking forward to it. Unfortunately, that was the last time that I got to see her alive, as she did succumb to her illness a couple of weeks later. Obviously, everyone was devastated, though we knew it was likely going to happen. We went through the normal mourning. We had a lovely service for her that was packed with my family, both close and extended, and the entire day was us all remembering her and talking about how much she was loved and was going to be missed. Fast forward to November of 2021, we were all trying to figure out what exactly we were going to do for the holiday. My aunt and uncle had inherited my grandmother's house when she passed, and they were living there, but we didn't really want to burden them with everyone showing up. Thankfully, they actually told everyone that they wanted to have Thanksgiving at the house, in a sort of way to honor my late grandmother. We all agreed. We made plans to have the day there at their house. I had actually had some photographs printed and framed for my aunt and uncle of my grandmother, and we put them in her room on her dresser. They had kept her room pretty much the way that she had left it. mostly because they didn't need the extra space yet, and it was just a nice way to still remember her. Dinner rolled around, and we were all sat at the table, and before we ate, my aunt mentioned saying a few words for my grandmother in lieu of grace. Basically, a way for telling her how much she was loved and missed. A few minutes into this whole thing, and things kind of started feeling a bit odd. I'm not sure how to explain it beyond saying something like it felt like the room was full of static or electricity, or like there was just a lot of energy that had filled the room. When we finally got through the whole thing, I made a bit of a joke about how Grandma would tell us all to shush and stop talking her up like this. And as soon as I said that, the lights in the kitchen dimmed. I don't mean that they were slightly dimmed, I mean that they went to about half lit for nearly a full second. Honestly, I think we all knew what it was. My grandma was telling us that I was right, and that she didn't want any more of the sappy stuff. I laughed and just said, told you. The whole family chuckled, and we all moved on to eating our dinner. After we ate, and after most everyone had left, those of us that were still there were having a nice chat about how the year had gone, how much everyone had done that year, and our plans for the next. After a bit of talking, I got up to go to the restroom, and on my way back there, I noticed that the door to my grandmother's room was slightly opened, and the light was on. I went into the room and was honestly taken aback for a moment. When I opened the door, I swear that I saw my grandmother sitting on her bed, holding one of the photos that I had printed of her. Within that second, she was gone, but the picture was still lying on the bed. I know that some people could say that this was just a hallucination, that it wasn't really her, but I can't even begin to explain how real it was. She was really there, at least in spirit. And the fact that the picture was lying on the bed, which is not where it was placed originally, tells me all that I need to know. No one had gone into her room that night. I'm certain of it. So there's no way for that frame to have moved, much less halfway across the bedroom onto her bed. I know that this wasn't necessarily creepy, but it was heartwarming to me, and I really wanted to share it. Now that Thanksgiving is coming up again and we've all agreed to have dinner at the house for another year, I'm curious if I'm going to see my grandmother once more, or if she's already passed on. Either way, she knows that she was loved, and that she is loved, and that she will always be missed by the family. And I like to believe that these two little events were her keeping her promise about being there for Thanksgiving and letting us know that she will always be with us in spirit. I have a creepy story that happened way back when I was like 11, back in the mid to late 80s. I want to start this story by saying that my Aunt Sherry was not mentally okay. She very clearly had a mental sickness that was never taken care of or addressed, and it's entirely likely that this was because of the time. Mental illness is taken very seriously now, but 30-ish years ago, people were basically just called crazy and locked away or ignored. It's a sad truth, but it is the truth. I know a lot of people back then that had their crazy family member that they all just didn't talk to. Anyways, as I said, my aunt had mental illnesses that were not addressed. And because of this, she was shunned by a lot of the family and excluded from most things that we did. I was only 10 at first, but I saw what they were doing and it really did upset me that they treated her like this. Because of this, I tried to be as nice and talkative to her as I could when I saw her. Most of the time when I saw her, she was pretty normal, and we would have conversations about myself and what I was doing at school, which wasn't much, just being a kid. However, there were times where she would be having her issues, and she would start to tell me things that I didn't understand. There was one point where she told me that I needed to be cleansed because I was being inhabited by a demon. I remember that exact sentence because it was weird. I asked her how I would do that, and she told me to cut myself with a knife and drain the evil from my body. This was one of those moments where I did see that she wasn't all there, but I still didn't want to just avoid her because she had problems. Unfortunately, this leads to the event in question that this story is about. It was actually on the day of my 11th birthday party that this all happened. My actual birthday was in the middle of the week, so my parents had given me my gifts during the week. They then told me that we could have a small get-together with some family on that Saturday. I, of course, asked if we could invite my Aunt Sherry. My mother was incredibly reluctant to agree to my request, but after I begged, she ended up saying that she would call her and ask her if she wanted to come. On the day of my gathering, a few of my family members did show up, including my cousins and my other aunt and uncle, and then my Aunt Sherry finally showed up as well. I was over the moon that she was there. As soon as she got there, I started talking to her and asking her all about how she was doing, and she was asking me about school. It went pretty normal for a while. We chatted about everything, and then I decided I wanted to show her what I had gotten for my birthday. I brought her over to my room, and I showed her my new pet rabbit that my parents had just gotten for me. He was a cute little black and white rabbit, and he was incredibly friendly. I was able to take him out and show her while holding him, and she told me that he was the cutest rabbit that she had ever seen. I was so happy that she approved of him, and I loved him, so it was a great moment. After a few minutes of petting him and talking with Sherry, my mom called us into the living room saying that dinner was ready. I went ahead and put him back into the cage, and we went to go eat. Again, everything was normal during the dinner. We all chatted like normal. My aunt seemed calm and collected, which made me happy. And it was a great time. After we all ate, my mom said that we were going to do the cake in a few moments, and my Aunt Sherry asked if we could wait a moment while she went to the restroom. We all agreed. She walked away down the hall, and I sat there with a lot of anticipation. After about 10 or so minutes, my aunt still wasn't back yet, and we were all getting kind of impatient. Especially myself. My mom said that she would go check to see if Sherry was okay. I agreed, and we all just sat there and waited in silence. Then, that silence was broken by my mother screaming my aunt's name and the chaos that followed. My aunt came running out of the hallway into the living room where everyone was waiting, and she was covered in what looked like blood. She was screaming that she was sorry, that she didn't mean to do it, and that she only did it because she needed to remove the demons from my life. I'm sure that the situation that occurred is kind of obvious, but I'll go over it in basic details. Sherry went over to the restroom. She did what she needed to do, but then she had a random urge to go into my bedroom. When she did, she said that she was told by a higher power that the rabbit needed to die because he was a demon, and he was going to kill me. Not going into further detail beyond that or what she actually did, but she did kill my new pet rabbit, and my mom walked in on it. After she was trying to explain herself, my dad threw her out of the house and screamed at her to leave and to never come back. I was traumatized by this whole event, and obviously my little family get-together for my birthday was over. I wasn't allowed or able to go back into my room for over a week until my parents got the whole room cleaned up and got the cage removed. Thankfully, I didn't see the scene that was left because it probably would have killed me. I wish that this story had some kind of happy ending or a silver lining, or that I could say that this was a breaking point for my Aunt Sherry to get help, but it wasn't. I was very much traumatized by this whole thing, and it made me change my mind about my aunt. I wanted to be friends with her, but I couldn't after this. She tried to come over to the house to apologize to me once more, but I wanted nothing to do with her, and my dad told her that if she ever came back, he would have her arrested. That day was actually the last time that I ever saw her. I think this whole situation was the final escalation of her mental problems, because about a month after this, she actually ended her own life. There wasn't a note or anything. She had just taken her own life, and that was it. As I mentioned in the beginning, I hate that all of this happened. My aunt had problems that were never addressed or diagnosed, and it caused trauma for myself and my family, and ultimately led to her death. Like I mentioned, mental issues were a lot more taboo just 30 years ago. They weren't always addressed, and people with the issues were sometimes exiled. That's pretty much what happened here. I hope that Sherry did find peace after she left this life. And I wish that I could tell her that I do forgive her, and that I know it wasn't her doing. It was the mental issues, the disease that controlled her mind. I know that she loved me. I know that she cared about me, and I'm honestly sorry that I couldn't have done anything else for her. Hey there, friends. So that was today's video, which was a collection of family gathering stories. This was going to be a Thanksgiving stories video, but I kind of thought that expanding it to be just family gatherings was a better idea, and I think it's better for it, but that's my opinion. You may agree, you may not agree, I don't know. No. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. If you really liked the video and are new to the channel, consider subscribing. And if you would feel so bold, please consider leaving a comment down below, letting me know your plans for the Thanksgiving holiday if you have any, if you're in a place where this specific Thanksgiving is celebrated. I know other parts of the world celebrate their Thanksgivings on different days, different months. And this is American Thanksgiving, and that's where I am, so of course it's where I'm going to celebrate it, right? That just makes sense. But yeah. Leave me a comment down below. If you're not celebrating Thanksgiving, then just what you're doing this week, what your weekend plans are, etc. Yep. So, I guess in order to wrap this video up, as this will be my last video before Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving will be tomorrow, I want to let everybody know that I'm thankful for you. I am genuinely thankful for each and every single one of you that has ever supported this channel in any way, shape, or form. Whether that means you watched this video for 35 seconds, or maybe you've been watching my videos for 3 years now, because we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of the channel, so whether it's been a minute or 3 years, I'm thankful for you. I do this because I love it. I do this because I enjoy it. And the fact that people come in here and tell me that they enjoy my work, that my videos help them get through the day sometimes, it means the world to me. Every single time somebody comes in here and says something about how they listen to my videos to get through the day at the office, or just to do, their tasks, their chores or whatever, it means more to me than I can ever explain. Because that's where I was. That's the person I was. I listened to Joel and Southern Canny and Swamp Dweller and all them. I listened to them when I worked at the office because I needed it to get through my day. So the fact that I'm on this end of this is something that it would be impossible to overstate how grateful for I am. I am beyond grateful that this is working and that y'all still support me. So, again, thank you. Seriously, thank you to all of you. And of course, my friends, until I see you again, please, sleep well.
Back in 2013, I was living with my ex at the time, who lived near a nice country village, and as I was in between jobs at the time, I picked up a job at a local garden center. It was casual retail work, fairly decent pay, and easygoing enough that I could take coffee breaks frequently, and wear basically whatever I liked as long as I wore my work polo shirt. It was walking distance from my ex's house, and full of people of all ages who were the most lovely people I had ever met. Most of the regular customers who came to the garden center were sweet old people who would visit the cafe because we had free teas and discounted lunches for OAPs if they had a store card. You often got to know every single one of them, and some of them we even gave nicknames. Most of them sweet, like Pink Hair Lady, a badass 80-year-old grandma who wore a tasseled leather jacket and bright pink hair. Then there was Camper Van Couple, who used to drive in a really cool camper van with bright orange flowers painted on it. You get the idea. With Creepy Artist Man, though, he gave most of the young girls weird vibes. He wore a straw hat, was in his late 40s, and had round gold-rimmed glasses. He would wear strange graphic shirts with naked women on them, or Professional Pussy Patrol sort of slogans on the back. He always wore ripped jeans where his knees were always hanging out of them, which were always dirty with paint or mud or something. He had this weird half smile that would never leave his face, and a kind of leer that made people feel uncomfortable. He would take off his glasses and clean them constantly, which kind of made you feel like he was trying to get a better look at the girls who worked there, especially the younger ones. 16-plus school leavers, usually. Anyway, it was a roasting hot summer's day, and I had gratefully accepted the job of watering the hanging baskets outside, where I could avoid the humid, sweaty heat of the greenhouses. I was wearing black shorts and my red polo, and my tool belt to prune and deadhead plants as well. With the hose in my hand and sunnies on my face, I was busy, but enjoying the solitary job at the quietest part of the garden center. Well, hello there. Out of practically nowhere, he slipped out behind some wooden trellises and looked me up and down, smiling with his weird, too small teeth. His eyes lingered on me for what felt like an uncomfortable few seconds, and I turned off my hose and asked him if he needed anything. He shook his head and kind of shrugged, still smirking at my legs. I'll call him CAG for ease. Okay, sir. Have a nice day. Let me know if you need anything. I turned to continue. I've never seen you here before. You're a new one? Huh? Me? I've been here for 8 months now. I must have missed the memo that a beauty like you started. You have a nice tan. You look young. Thanks. I'm 23. Anyways, I have to get back to work. Nice to meet you. I suddenly remember my name badge and get irritated that he now knew my full name. I make a beeline for the smoking area, where the tool shed was, with an excuse to grab some smaller gardening gloves, and by the time I returned to the floor, he had left. As the weeks went by, he would come into the store regularly, usually mid-afternoon, coincidentally, or so I thought, around the time I started my shift. Most of the time I was the only cashier, so I would have to serve him. He would buy the smallest, most pointless things, like floristry wire or a tiny bag of birdseed. It seemed like he would purposely make a purchase with the intention of interacting with me. He would make comments about my appearance, statements mostly like, "You have your hair different today. Yesterday you had it down." Or, "You have new glasses." Or, "That's a different lip color to yesterday." He would always announce my name very loudly and deliberately during every interaction. It felt uncomfortable, but I was 23, and just politely shrugged it off. Around Christmas time, I was decorating the artificial trees, and he cornered me in the forest of them at the back of the store. He jumped out from behind one, and made me jump, to which I was kind of pissed about him doing so, because I dropped a glass ornament and it had smashed. He bent down also and tried to help, grabbing my wrist and telling me not to touch the glass. His grip was scarily tight and forceful, and his hands were clammy and gross. I slipped my hand out of his grip and asked if I could help him with anything. That's when it got weird. He pulled out a leaflet from his back pocket and told me that he was an artist and had a Christmas art show happening in the local church hall. He wanted me to go with him. He told me that he was a painter, and he thought I would like his work. I had never indicated I was interested in art to him or anyone else for that matter, which is why I thought this was so strange. I asked him if he wanted me to pin the leaflet to the local event board, and he reached out and touched my arm and said, "No, this invitation is specifically for you." He pointed his finger and jabbed it into my breast, and he said, "You." I'm standing there in a dark corner, obscured from view by artificial Christmas trees, just kind of cornered by this guy who was touching me. I cringed away and said, "I was busy with my boyfriend that day, sorry," and kind of scampered off. I remember feeling really strange after that. The fact he grabbed my wrist and jabbed his finger into my chest that way. I told a few of my colleagues about it, and they all told me they would warn me next time he was in the store, so I could maybe hang out at the storeroom until he was gone. Well, that memo must have been missed by a few of the temp Christmas staff, because one day I get told by one, "Your friend is asking for you at the tills." It wasn't unusual for my friends to stop by, as I was fairly popular for gifts and the like, so thinking it was maybe my ex's mom or something, I head to the till, and there he is. He's holding a piece of paper. I cringe, but he had seen me now, so I walk over and ask what he needed from me. He passed the paper over and asked me to open it. Folded up was a drawing of me, with exaggerated breasts and cartoon-like eyes watering the hanging baskets with a sexual kind of position. I stood there and said thank you, but I couldn't keep it, as I thought it was inappropriate to take gifts from customers. I handed it back to him, and he looked at me with an angry stare. He turned around and walked out without another word. By this point I had had enough. I knocked on my manager's door and told him about the whole scenario that just happened, all the previous interactions I had had with him over the past year. He watched the CCTV and agreed that it was so strange, the way he gave me the gross picture and told me he would talk to him if he came back. He praised me for my reaction to his advances and said I was doing the right thing and he would try to see him off the next time. The next day was a Sunday, and I was not due in to work. My boss calls me and tells me he just received a call from HQ, stating that an anonymous caller had called in to report a staff member inappropriately coming on to a customer. The staff member they had described and named was me. The caller had said that I had been inappropriate towards him at work, offered to have sex with him and had led him on, and was obviously promiscuous, that I had been pursuing him for over a year. The jerk even described a fictitious relationship we had had, and ranted loudly about how I had been cheating on my boyfriend before hanging up. HQ luckily didn't believe a word, as my manager had already mentioned the guy to one of the higher-ups, but they thought it was wise to let me know about this crazy guy, and suggested I reported it to police. The next day, I did just that. The officer I spoke to said he matched the description of a man who was a local pest, somebody who would often harass young girls in the local area. He was also known to stalk young girls in his car, and had attempted to abduct one 4 years ago. Police officers assured me they would file the report and talk to him officially, and that he was not allowed to be in the garden center or anywhere near me again. If he did, I was to call the police and he would be immediately arrested. Unfortunately, though, it never stopped him from sending a ranting letter to my workplace addressed to me, saying he would kill himself if I didn't take him back and received his gift he drew of me. Fortunately, the police took this as unsolicited contact, and he was thankfully immediately arrested. I'm using a secondary account for obvious reasons. This event is still ongoing. However, I was hoping to seek some advice from you guys, because I honestly have no idea what to do. To begin with, I've always had this feeling that someone was watching me, ever since I moved into my family house 8 years ago. At first, I thought I had just watched too much ID investigation, and that I was being a bit paranoid. But I couldn't help looking over my shoulder when I would walk to school or to my bus stop. When I would walk to school, I was always scared in the mornings, when it would be dark during the winter or fall, because where I live is just vast country lands. I live in Canada, and though not much crime happens in my neighborhood, I could just never rid myself of this eerie feeling. Even when I would come home from school, being home alone didn't help. I would triple check my windows and locks, just to make sure everything was locked up. However, in my basement, our garage door would never fully lock, since the door hinge was broken and detached from the door. Therefore, it could never properly close. I always told my dad to fix this door, but because he would always go away for work, he never found the time to do so. Stupidly, I thought nothing bad would happen, since my garage needed a 4-digit passcode to get in. On a side note, I just want to let everyone know that you should never, under any circumstances, put your birthday as your passcode for anything. Even if you switch up the date so that the day is first and the month is second, don't do it, because it's pretty obvious. Now my theory is that he knew the passcode to my house. Therefore, he had free reign for 7 years to go through my things. At first, I thought I was being forgetful. Maybe I was the one who misplaced my underwear somewhere. Maybe I was the one who misplaced my favorite top, or maybe my dad accidentally donated it. But I should have known better. During my 4 years of high school, he never really contacted me. It was when I went to university that things suddenly started to change. Since I lived in the countryside, I decided to go to university an hour away. My dad didn't want me to live on residence because he didn't want to leave the house unattended for long periods of time. So we came to the conclusion that it would be best if I drive to and from school. Now, I would leave for university very early in the morning, at around 6 a.m., and come back at around 6 p.m. at night. I stopped being aware of my surroundings at this time, because I would be tired from my 12-hour days. And now that I wasn't walking home alone anymore, everything would be fine. When I would come home from university, I would find certain things moved in my house. I'm a neat freak, and I may have mild OCD, so I like things in a very particular way in my house. Little things like my makeup or candles would be moved. I thought it was odd and would frequently bring it up to my dad, but he would just say that it must have been me who was doing it. But it wasn't me. During my 2nd and 3rd year in university, I started to get weird notes in my mailbox. The writing on these notes looked almost childlike, and it would always be written in blue ink. I have those country-style mailboxes at the end of my driveway, where the little red flag goes up whenever we get mail. From my way back from university, I would always check the mail, and sometimes I would find these letters. The letters would never be long. In fact, it would only ever be 1 to 3 sentences, and they would contain odd questions like, "Where are you? I wonder what you do while you're away from home. How do you find university? It must be tiring driving that long. Did you make new friends? Do you still hang out with your best friend? You dress differently now. Why is that? I miss the scarves you used to wear. You don't close your curtains as much anymore. Why don't you look for me?" And these letters would always come once a month at the beginning of the month. I would show my dad, and at first he would say, "Oh, maybe our cousins are just pranking you," or "It's probably your friends." But every time I would ask my friends or cousins, they would give me this confused response, saying they never sent me any letters. Now that I'm in my 4th year at university, the letters don't come as frequently. But 2 weeks ago, something happened that makes me think things are escalating. I came back home from university at 7:45 p.m., and it was fairly dark outside. I saw that my mailbox flag was up, so I checked the mail, and it was mostly just bills. At this point, I haven't gotten a note for a little over 3 months now, so I'm thinking maybe the notes won't come anymore. As I settle in for bed, I change into my pajamas and check the locks as usual. As I checked my front door lock, I looked out the glass panel of my door, and I saw that the red flag of my mailbox is up again. It's 10:30 at night. No way the mail could have gotten dropped off, and plus I had just checked it. I call my dad and tell him about it, and he said not to freak out, that maybe one of our neighbors accidentally got some of our mail and just dropped it off since this happens frequently. I stay on the phone with my dad as I quickly run down my driveway to check the mailbox. As I open the mailbox, I feel my heart drop because it's an unmarked manila envelope. I quickly run back inside and open the manila envelope, and although there's no written note, I find something more disturbing. It's a pair of my old blue panties that I haven't seen in years. At this point I scream, and my dad tells me to hang up and call my aunt, who's a police officer. My aunt comes over and checks the inside and outside of my house, but she can't find anything. She tries to jog my memory and asks if I know anyone who could be doing this, but I honestly have no clue. My aunt told me to keep any more letters I get, and she's been staying with me the days my dad is out for work. My dad is thinking about installing security cameras, and hopefully we can catch whoever it is that way. But what else can I do? I'm paranoid because I don't know who this person is, but I know he's been stalking me for a long time. Those panties he sent me were ones I had while I was in high school, and I lost that pair while I was in grade 10. The fear of the unknown is getting to me so much that my anxiety is not letting me function normally. I just don't know what to do. This all happened yesterday, and I'm writing this on my phone from our hotel room, so please forgive my grammatical errors. Here we go. Fort Bragg, California is a small beach town northwest of Sacramento. It has a kind of Stephen King vibe to it. You know what I mean. That misty, almost eerie, small harbor town. But it's beautiful, and a huge tourist attraction. You get people from all over the US that travel here. My fiancé and I decided to drive up here after I had to take some time off work due to stress. It was a last-minute decision, and we packed up our bags in less than 10 minutes, grabbed our dog, and took off. If we wouldn't have had our dog with us, I'm pretty sure I would have lost her. I guess this is where I tell the story, right? It's our second day here right now, and we're staying in a motel that overlooks the ocean. You can see the fog roll in during the early hours of the morning, and watch the fishing boats leave the harbor to go get their haul for the day. It really is a beautiful thing to see. I woke up early, and I was craving, and I mean craving, eggs and bacon. After getting dressed and deciding what spot to stuff our faces at, we left on our morning adventure. See, here's where I made my mistake. I was driving down the road, and it looked like the stop we crawled up to was a four-way stop sign. I clearly guessed wrong, because when I pulled out and cut off a small Ford Ranger with a dinky trailer attached to it and two old men driving, I realized I was a little too late and that I had cut them off. They threw up their hands and pointed at me, but Lily didn't even notice. I threw up my hands in a sorry I'm just a dipshit tourist kind of way, and they just stared me down. It was a hillbilly standoff that George Strait would be proud of. I didn't think much of it, and kept driving down the foggy two-lane road to get breakfast. I didn't even say anything to her about it. I never thought I'd see them again, and I didn't want her to complain about me not knowing how to drive. I was wrong, though. I was wrong, and I'll never forget what happened next. We got back to the motel after a not-so-great but overly expensive breakfast. We cuddled up and talked about our plans for the wedding, what we wanted to do after the wedding, and midway through our life plans, she realized that we were out of dog food to feed Bruce. I agreed to going up to the cute but creepy market and grabbing a bag of goodies, kissed her on the cheek, and jumped in the Navy. We call her Navigator Navi. I left and got about halfway to the store before I realized that I had forgotten my wallet on the nightstand. When I pulled back into the parking lot, I saw it. That same Ford Ranger with the janky trailer attached to it. The only difference was that Hank and Boomhauer weren't inside of it. I don't remember seeing them here last night, I thought. I walked up to our door while looking over my shoulder, wondering, what are the chances these douchebags are staying here? Not 2 seconds later, my heart started to beat faster. Our motel door was open, but barely cracked. It was open slightly to the point where you could see a sliver of light, but nothing more. I pushed it open and looked inside, but I didn't see anything. Lily and Bruce were both gone. It was like they were never really there at all. My heart started racing, and I dropped my keys on the floor and ran outside, heart pounding in my chest faster than a jackhammer in New York. I didn't see the creepy old guys from the Ford truck or my fiancé outside. I was becoming angry and frantic by this point. Fuck, where are you guys? I thought, before screaming inside my head was cut off by the sound of familiar barking. I heard Bruce barking and I ran. I ran faster than I ever have in my 28 years of life. I ran straight over to the front office where the sound was coming from, and that's when I saw her and our dog inside the office. She was crying, sitting on the floor sobbing uncontrollably, and his hair was standing straight up until he saw that it was me sprinting towards them. Lily got up and ran into my arms. Meanwhile, the clerk is on the phone, and I'm wondering, what the hell happened in the 2 minutes I was gone? This is what happened, told by her, and it makes my blood run cold. As soon as I left, not 30 seconds went by when those guys knocked on the door. Lily opened it up thinking it was me forgetting something, which I had, and they tried to force their way into the room. One of them said, "You can thank your boy toy for what's coming to you," while grabbing her and covering her mouth. But these assholes didn't realize one thing. That's that we had a dog in our back seat when I cut them off. Bruce jumped off the bed and didn't hesitate to bite the one grabbing her. They kicked at him and tried to shake him off, but he wouldn't let go. After being bit and realizing that the noise would draw attention if they didn't leave, they ran off and Lily was able to run to the front office and wait for help. Bruce followed suit. I wasn't there. I couldn't protect her. If we would have found a dog sitter, she could be gone right now. But my dog was there, and he did exactly what a good boy, no, the best boy would do. And for that, he is truly my best friend. If he wasn't there, what would have happened? Would she have been kidnapped? beaten, killed. The craziest thing is that they haven't been caught yet. We filed all the reports with the local sheriff. I told them what had happened earlier that morning, and the cop looked right at me and said, "You're lucky your dog was there. If he wasn't, and they got in there with her, you could have been filing a different report right now." I got tears in my eyes at that. I looked over at Lily and Bruce and thanked God that I rescued him from the pound, because in return he rescued the love of my life when I couldn't. The only information we had from the sheriff after about a week is that the truck was not owned by the people that committed the crime. Also, after going down to the sheriff's station, we couldn't identify the man they arrested. They didn't look anything like the two guys I had seen and that Lily had come in contact with. Right now, they're out there, somewhere, hiding or acting like nothing happened. We're back home in Sacramento, and Bruce as well as Lily are both safe. If I hear anything else, I'll update you all again.